Hey everyone, happy Friday. Another week done. Feels like just last Friday I was talking to you, but here we are. Another week has gone by and back again with another Facebook Live. So I hope everyone had a good week. Super productive. Starting to get nice and warm here in New Hampshire, so we had a couple nice days this week where I took advantage of getting out on the trails and whatnot. So I hope it's nice wherever you are as well. Um, Today I want to talk a little bit about your gut and how the gut relates to athletics and exercise. So I don't doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not, but I'm sure at some point uh, in your fitness journey that you've done some type of exercise and your gut has affected you in some way. Um, Lots of times, people will make jokes about, that the race is won in the porta potties. And while it's pretty funny to think about, it's lots of times pretty true, right? Uh, your your digestion on race day or during exercise can really affect your performance. If you end up doing something wrong or you eat something bad, something that doesn't agree with you right before exercising, it can be a pretty terrible experience. So I think the key to preventing some of these problems is actually knowing a little bit more about the role your gut plays and how your gut interacts or is affected by exercise and racing. And with that knowledge, then you can try and mitigate the chances of potentially having some kind of disastrous experience, GI distress and whatnot, during exercise or racing. So there are kind of three key things that can really affect your gut. One is being in an extreme caloric deficit for too long, and being an athlete or exercising at the same time can do some damage to your gut. So there's a study done where they surveyed a number of athletes, female athletes in the Rio Olympic Games, and they found that almost all of these athletes who were in energy deficit, meaning they were in a caloric deficit, also had GI issues. And what happens is extreme, or not extreme, but a long-term caloric deficit can break down the mucosal lining inside your gut, and that makes your gut more susceptible to having issues when you eat food. On the opposite end of the spectrum, which can also be a problem, is eating too much food is pretty hard on your gut. So if you think about the amount of exercise that some of us are doing, especially when we're talking about endurance exercise, in order to eat back the amount of calories that you burn and not be in a extreme caloric deficit, it's a lot of food to process, especially when we're talking about a whole foods diet. And quite simply, our guts didn't evolve to handle that amount of food. So it can put a lot of stress on the gut as well. Eating too much food is also an issue. And the fact that you're exercising itself also causes a lot of stress on the gut, right? As soon as you start exercising, within about 10 minutes or so of just moderate exercise, blood starts to get diverted away from the gut, and that goes to be used by the muscles that you're using to exercise. And that means that whatever is in your gut is no longer being digested. So, one or two bad things can happen in this case. One is that the food that's in your gut will start to ferment and produce a lot of gas, and that just gets you that, you burp or, comes out the other end, or you get bloated, or the second thing that might happen is that a lot of water gets sucked into the gut to deal with the food, and that can cause things like diarrhea and stuff like that. So Um, Having food in your gut while you're exercising can be a problem. Um, Also, intense or long duration exercise can start to break up the gut barrier and cause a leaky gut, which will allow food particles and stuff that's in your gut to go out from your gut and into your bloodstream, which is not supposed to happen, and can cause a lot of inflammation and even in some cases some allergies. And it can go the other way around where blood from outside of your gut comes into the gut, and then you just see blood in your stool and stuff like that. Lots of potential downsides here when you're talking about the gut and exercise and athletics, and some things to think about. So what can you do to help mitigate some of the problems here? Well, the first thing you want to do is eat a whole foods diet. We want to remove any kind of processed food from our diet, which is counterintuitive, I guess, to the message that we get as active individuals, right? We think that if you're exercising real hard, you need to have this Gatorade, or you need to consume one gel every 30 minutes while you're exercising, and these are just really processed foods that we're eating. And processed foods cause inflammation in the gut, and additional inflammation is not going to help the situation. So we want to eat a whole foods diet, and we also want to identify any foods that are causing potential issues in that whole foods diet, right? So if beans, for example, cause a lot of issues for you, digestive issues, you should probably avoid them most of the time, and especially around any type of exercise that you're going to be doing. If eating, some people who eat like nightshade vegetables can have issues. Identifying any other potential food sensitivities that you might have, even when eating a whole foods diet, and getting those out of your diet is going to be step number one. You probably want to eat more of a balanced macronutrient type of diet in this case. That seems to help the gut, right? So for one reason, if you eat a lot of fat, right, if you're keto and you have a giant, bulletproof coffee before your workout with a lot of fat in it, fat can tend to assist making endotoxins pass across the gut barrier, which is not something you want to have happen. So having a lot of fat before exercise is not good. On the opposite end of the spectrum, having a ton of sugar can also not be good for the reasons I just talked about. A lot of times these sugary things are processed products, and that causes a lot of inflammation. In addition, you get to worry about things like athletes who are extremely active but end up developing things like type 2 diabetes. So somewhere in the middle, where you're not having too much fat and you're not eating too much sugar, is probably a good idea as far as your gut is concerned. At the same time, we want to spend some time becoming fat adapted or metabolically flexible, and teaching your body to learn how to utilize fat for fuel. Why is that important? Well, the more fat that you utilize during exercise, the less calories you have to consume. If you're a carb-dependent athlete, you're consuming a lot of calories, and like we just said, that processing those calories during exercise can prove to be problematic. So the less calories you have to take in, the easier it is on your gut, and the better it's going to be, less chance of you having any kind of GI issues. So spending some time being fat adapted, or teaching your body to be fat adapted and metabolically flexible so it knows how to use the right fuel source for the right type of exercise, is going to be beneficial for your gut as well. In some cases, you do have to eat food, right? In some type of endurance events, eating during exercise is unavoidable. You have to do it if you want to perform in most cases. So my advice in those cases is to eat something that's as easily digestible as possible, and this can be completely dependent on the person. So some people might do well with one thing, but another person might have a bunch of GI issues for it. I like to initially suggest, when you're trying to figure out what to do, is to look at liquid calories, because in liquid form things are a lot easier to digest. You don't have to like break down that food, it's already kind of pre-digested for you. So it makes it easier in your gut and causes a lot less um, GI symptoms. And I'm not talking about like garbage liquid calories, I'm talking about like whole food source liquid calories, things like MCT oils or some amino acids that are in a powdered form. You can even find like sweet potato powder or things like UCAN, are like things that you can put in a water solution and get some calories in, different types of macronutrients, but are also not very hard on your stomach to actually digest, because remember that blood is being diverted away from the stomach during exercise, so you're not going to have the same digestive functionality that you normally would. And then lastly, we don't want to eat too close to exercise on either end, right? So obviously having a big meal before your exercise is going to be an issue. Try to avoid exercising too close to meals. So, maybe like an hour before, at least finish your last meal before you go and do any kind of exercise. Same with afterwards, right? Your body is still kind of processing all that exercise. The blood might be still coming back to your stomach. So eating a big meal right after exercise is probably not going to be good. So waiting some time post-exercise to consume any kind of food would kind of help mitigate any kind of digestive symptoms. And if there was any kind of damage done to your gut during exercise, it'll give it time to settle down before you actually eat that first meal. So just to give you something to think about. I have a blog post that I'm going to hopefully post over the weekend or early next week on this topic with a lot more detail. So look for that in the coming days. Talk soon.